Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Money Law. My name's Yashasaba, and today we're going to talk about prenuptial agreements. As the saying goes, now I'm not saying he or she is a gold digger, but he or she is not messing with a broke. As always, it's important to remember I am licensed to practice law as an attorney here in California. However, a lot of the advice I give does transcend across to the rest of the United States and even parts of the world. So just remember, don't take my advice as legal advice. This is all just for your education. If you do have any legal questions, please contact an attorney in your local area. So the reason we're talking about prenups today is because they're becoming more important than ever before. Since 2010 up until now, the demand for prenuptial agreements has more than doubled among millennials. There are a lot of millennials that are starting to get married at a later date, and because of that, they're acquiring more assets. Also, the internet has made us a lot more educated than ever before, and we're seeing that it makes more sense to have these legal structures put in place in order to protect the marriage and make sure no one is taken advantage of. Regardless of the reason on whether you want a prenup or you think you want to get a prenup or you just got married and you're thinking about getting a postnup, we're going to give you some insight today to see if that makes sense for you. So this is a perfect segue into talking about the benefits and drawbacks of having a prenuptial agreement. First, what are the different ways that your prenuptial agreement can get nullified? All right, the first step is you didn't have separate independent representation, right? If both you and your spouse go to one attorney and that one attorney is hired to draw up your prenuptial agreement, that might work and it might be fine, but guess what? If their one spouse was the one that chose the attorney and that attorney drew the paper, the other spouse, when you're getting a divorce, can easily argue saying, oh, you picked the attorney, it was all one-sided, I really didn't have much of a say. And that gives the court access to just nullify the prenuptial agreement and follow the court's law and the state's law on how everything gets divided. And for the person who went and found the attorney, they might have had good intentions. You might have had good intentions, but realistically, you need to protect yourself too. So you have to tell your spouse, you need to go find your own attorney for this. You can help your other spouse find their own attorney, but then that relationship needs to just be between their attorney and your future spouse and not with you at all. And your attorney and their attorney and all of you guys come together and finalize the agreement. And the next way is, what are the terms of your prenuptial agreement? If you have very one-sided terms of the prenuptial agreement, there's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes one spouse brings a lot of assets, a lot of family money, inheritance, or they've had their own business before they got married, and that is what they want to protect on their end to make sure that that remains theirs in the event of a divorce. But then the other spouse is thinking, he has a lot of assets, she has a lot of assets, I'm going to rely on that, and maybe I'm being asked to leave my job. Maybe I'm being asked to stay at home and raise the kids myself. Or I have some money, but we want to live in this bigger house because we both together have the money to pay for it. But should something happen and our marriage is ended, I don't have the money to be able to afford a house like that. I can't survive on my own like he or she can. So sometimes if it's one-sided, it's fine, but you have to make sure that you make that explicitly clear how one-sided it is so that there's no undue influence or duress. It shouldn't feel like one spouse was forced to sign this prenuptial agreement. Both spouses have to acknowledge the size of their estate coming into the marriage, and both spouses need to agree to that size and to, if more money is going one way, less money is going the other way, they are in agreement of that. And they have to show that there was no duress or undue influence and that none of these provisions are unconscionable, meaning so unfair to the other side that it would break our public policy as a country, as a government, as society in order to let something like that stand. Unconscionable. So that's another reason why it is primarily good. I guarantee you will not have any of these hurdles on your prenuptial agreement if you have independent attorneys representing the both of you. So let's touch on the benefits and drawbacks of having a prenuptial agreement. First, you're putting everything on paper and you are laying out with each other on what the terms are should you end the marriage. So there's never any fear. And I think that is actually good for a marriage because it's open communication. It's coming to terms with each other on how you want your marriage to go. And from there, neither one of you have any fears on what will happen next. You're more focused on building your relationship and not making poor decisions based on fears of getting out of your relationship. The drawbacks though, sometimes it's a difficult conversation to have because you're so new. You guys are newlyweds, you're optimistic, you're forming a union, you can see a life with each other forever for the rest of your lives. Isn't that awesome? And all of a sudden you want to talk about, wait, what if this ends? It kind of does feel a little counterintuitive. I know it does. But the reality is that sometimes you might be giving your other significant other, your spouse, peace of mind knowing that you're willing to work with them and have this conversation and take the time to put stuff down on paper on how each of you are going to be protected in the event of a dissolution of your marriage. So here are some things that you might not have ever heard of or believed could actually go into a prenuptial agreement. The top one that I'm seeing trending today is genetic material. A lot of ladies are starting to freeze their eggs so that they can have children a little bit later in life in order to allow their careers to grow or build, or to allow them to have time on finding the right spouse for them. Guys too are starting to do this. The trend is they're starting to freeze their sperm so that they can have children at a later date. Well, did you know you can put in your prenuptial agreement that in the event something happens to one of us or that we dissolve our marriage, you don't have access to my genetic material anymore. You can't go to the sperm bank or to the egg bank and take my eggs to make a baby for yourself, or take my sperm to make a baby for yourself. So that's one thing that you can kind of have a say on what you want to have happen to your genetic material, your DNA results, or anything like that in the prenuptial agreement. Another big item, especially out here in Silicon Valley, the Bay Area, where we have a lot of entrepreneurs and a lot of very smart, talented tech entrepreneurs coming together and forming unions with each other. You can put in your prenuptial agreement your ideas and intellectual property and how those get separated out and how those get divided. Yes, your ideas can even be protected by your prenuptial agreement. What does that mean? It might look something like this. I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a business owner, and I share a lot of great business ideas with my wife. And because I share those with her, it's a way for me to brainstorm, open up, and she helps me just kind of throw darts at the wall and see what sticks. But if we were to dissolve our marriage, what would happen to all those ideas I shared with her? Does she get to then go out and start her own companies based on that? Do I lose my rights to those ideas? If we have a prenuptial agreement, one thing we can do is put in some kind of non-disclosure agreement within that for our ideas and intellectual property. This is just one example of what you can do. So if we dissolve our marriage, it's almost the equivalent as both of us saying, the moment we get divorced, we sign an NDA. We have executed an NDA through our prenuptial agreement that you can't go and use my ideas for your own personal use. You can't go and share them with other people. You cannot go and post them on YouTube just to spite me because they're good ideas and there's other entrepreneurs out there that are ready to take them, right? A funny one that came up was sex toys. I know it sounds funny, but it's real. There's a lot of people that are creating prenuptial agreements for their very expensive sex toys. And what happens to those? Both adults came into the marriage with some kind of sexual relationship or foreplay that they enjoy having, and they spend a lot of money on enhancing that experience. But then the marriage didn't last because they focused more on those experiences, maybe, I don't know, than on a long-lasting marriage. Not saying that that's bad, but that is something that you can divide out. So as you can kind of see your intangible assets, your tangible assets, your prenuptial agreement can literally go through each one and parse through what you want to have happen to these assets if your marriage does not last. So do you think it makes sense to have a prenup? I think so. Yeah, absolutely. The hard part is that initial hurdle, that initial conversation with your significant other, and then the upfront cost. But right once you get past all of those, you've got more security, you've got more organization and awareness, financial organization for that matter, of your life. Should something happen to your marriage and your significant other also has that too. And you both have the peace of mind knowing that you are in this union together for life. But reality is, unions don't necessarily last all the time. And if this one doesn't last, that's okay, because we have a more amicable way of getting out of it so you don't spend your time in court with divorce attorneys, spending a ton of money trying to figure out what happens next and getting in fights with each other along the way. All right, that's it for today on Money Law. My name's Yasha Saba. If you like what you're hearing, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel below or follow me on LinkedIn, where I share a lot more insights on the law, business, and how to protect your loved one and assets. Remember, is it your money or theirs?